It's now 8 in the morning. The people of Burma chose this time, on the 8th day of the 8th month in 1988, to begin one of the most remarkable popular uprisings in modern times. The dock workers were the first to go on strike. Then in the days and weeks that followed, it seemed that almost everyone in Burma was showing a defiance and courage, at least equal to those who stormed the Berlin Wall.
The students began it. Then each group came out with a banner saying, "We're from the doctors, we're from the lawyers." And they walked through the street shouting various slogans, of which the most common was, "This is our business." The government, "This is our business." Running the country, "This is our business," which in Burmese is "Do ye, do ye, do ye, do ye."
As tension rose between the people and the regime, Ne Win faced a new opponent, whose presence in Burma he had not reckoned on. Aung San Suu Kyi, daughter of the national hero Aung San, returned from her home in England. The leaders of the democracy movement persuaded her to join the struggle, and at her first appearance in Rangoon, more than 500,000 people heard her call for the restoration of democracy. The people now had a leader. Suu Kyi had never been a politician, but now, as a founder of the National League for Democracy, she called for elections. She spoke at rallies throughout the country. In one incident, she came close to assassination when troops refused to let her pass and threatened to shoot her.
Whatever problems arise are generally created because a truckload of armed soldiers come along and start waving their guns around. If the secretary of the local store can order his men to shoot down people without any real cause, it means that there's something very wrong with the system.
Despite the massacres in Rangoon, still the generals feared Suu Kyi. In July 1989, she was placed under house arrest in her father's home. 3,000 of her party workers were also arrested. With the opposition weakened, so they thought, the generals called elections for the following year. But they had failed to understand the depth of the country's frustration. Even sections of the army and police who had not been involved in the killings supported Suu Kyi. The National League for Democracy won an overwhelming victory, gaining 82% of the parliamentary seats. The generals were stunned and refused to hand over power. But the people's desire for freedom could not be smothered. The atrocities of 1988 remained a rallying cry.
Troops have been shooting people all day, but twice today, troops came to the hospital demanding that they be given the bodies of the dead and also the wounded. When the nurses and the doctors refused, saying that the patients needed more treatment, the troops opened fire, killing at least 4 doctors and 8 nurses.
This is amateur videotape of Rangoon Hospital. Having banned foreign television, the regime ordered anyone with a camera to be shot on sight. In defiance of this, there was some courageous reporting. On one tape, the voices of two Burmese cameramen are heard as soldiers prepare to fire at them. "What shall we do?" asks one of them, to which his friend replies, "Keep on filming until they shoot us."
There was sort of like a civil war inside the city, and I could hear all the gunfire just sitting in my home. The military troops all over Rangoon, they've been shooting all the demonstrators. In one point, they didn't have enough medicine to treat these injured people. So doctors, nurses, and medical students decided to appeal to the military soldiers not to shoot anymore. And they had a banner, a Red Cross banner, writing, "Please stop shooting." And these soldiers even shot inside the Rangoon General Hospital. And there were many people killed at the time.
The generals so feared the power of the demonstrators that they moved to dispose of them, dead or alive, in Rangoon Cemetery. The atrocities even extended to the crematorium, where a line of trucks took the dead and the wounded.
In fact, my house is quite close to the crematorium. And during that time, I had a lot of news that they had brought a lot of dead bodies, and some of the bodies, some of the people were even not dead yet, and they were cremated. But at the same time, I could see the flame coming out from the cemetery all the time. And all the crematorium, in fact, were surrounded by the military troops.
So they were burning dead people and people who were not dead?
They didn't even identify the body. Not to mention to inform the parents. In fact, they just brought everybody that they saw on the street.
Suu Kyi remained a prisoner for 6 years. Alone in this house on University Avenue, she was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. Her whispered name became a byword, and people would pass her house just to be reassured by the sound of her playing her piano. Last year, she was finally released, though today she is still denied freedom of movement. As this film goes to air, her husband, Michael Arris, and their 2 sons in England have again been refused permission to visit her. Early one Saturday morning, David Munro and I went to see her, our cameras concealed from the military intelligence guards who continued to watch her every move.
What were the most difficult times to you personally during your house arrest?
There were times when I was worried for my colleagues, and there were times when I worried for our people out there when they seemed to be undergoing a lot of repression. And I worried about my sons very much because the young one was only 12. And he had to be put into boarding school. So, of course, naturally, I worried about these things.
Yes.
But then I would always remind myself that the families of my colleagues were far worse off because those of my colleagues who were put in prison in Burma, their families were also insecure.
Were you able to stay in touch with Michael during that time?
Not throughout that time. There were times when we were out of touch.
For how long? Was there?
I think the longest period was for about 2 years and 4 months or 5 months, something like that.
No letters or anything during that time? No letters from the children got through?
No.
I would try to imagine being you and surrounded by a hostile force, cut off from your family, your colleagues and comrades and friends. Weren't there times when you were actually terrified?
No, because I didn't feel hostile towards them. This is what people don't seem to understand. They say, well, you must have been terrified, but why? I didn't feel hostile towards the guards or the soldiers surrounding me. And I think fear comes out of hostility.
You and your people are at present up against quite uncompromising and brute power. How can you reclaim the democracy that you won at the ballot box with that power confronting you?
I don't think we're the first people who have had to face an uncompromising and brutal power.
But the question is the most difficult one,
in the quest for freedom and basic human rights. I think we depend chiefly on our own people, on the will of our own people for democracy.
But it still comes down to, on one side, there is a power that has all the guns.
But increasingly, I think it is getting more difficult in this world to resolve problems through military means. It is no longer acceptable. I do not think the ASEAN countries themselves would accept a military solution to the problem in Burma. And the fact that the authorities themselves are so keen on attacking us in their papers seem to indicate that they also are not depending on guns alone.
This is the death railway of World War II, carved through the Burmese jungle by the Japanese at the cost of 16,000 Allied lives. One life, it is said, for every sleeper. For the men who built this railway and survived, believing their horror would never happen again, there is a terrible irony here. During last year's 50th anniversary celebrations of victory over the Japanese, I remember the Burmese being mentioned just once in the television coverage. An ex-serviceman was asked by a reporter, "What about the Burmese?" And he replied that they had vanished when the Japanese invaded. In fact, more than 100,000 Burmese and other Asian prisoners also died building the death railway. If the British Army in Burma was a forgotten army, then the people over whose land it fought were invisible victims. And that remains true today as history repeats itself. This is the regime's great secret. An extension of the death railway linking the towns of Ye and Tavoy. Once again, it's being built with slave labour in an area where foreigners are banned. Under the noses of the guards, we filmed it for the first time. It has been estimated that more than 200,000 people have been forced to build this railway, of whom up to 300 have been killed or have died from disease and exhaustion. The democracy movement have tried to video